I'm glad to have today on this show a good friend of mine, Ima Akpan. Ima is a public affairs analyst. Ima is someone that doesn't keep quiet about the issues around us in society. I've heard Ima a number of times discuss on radio, on television, channels television, and other TV stations. And I have brought her so that we can also hear from her today. She's a committed member of the All Progressives Congress, the APC. And I'm glad to have you today.
Thank you. Thank you, Barrister. Ekemini. Do we limit it to Ekemini or Barrister Ekemini is fine. Yeah, it's my delight. I had looked forward to this moment, this session. Ever since you told me you have, a studio. And I like it. I love it here. Something less serious than you in white and black and a wig. Yeah. So thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you so much. Talking about the white and black as lawyers, sometimes I get tired of it. You have to wear black and white every day, go to court. Objection, my lord. Objection overruled.
Some persons, okay.
Yeah, so this one for me, when I'm not doing law, I just have conversations like this because I feel that there are so many things to discuss in society.
Sure.
So I have conversations like this with like minds, with people that, have things to say to society. And I know very well you're one of such persons that people should listen to. Ima, Nigeria in the last 9 years, citizens have had varied opinions about issues in Nigeria in the last 9 years. Your party, the APC, came into power in 2015 and produced President Muhammadu Buhari, the very first president produced by the APC. And he was in government for 8 years. And after that, he handed over power to the current president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Let me start with your assessment of the Buharis administration.
Okay. I've been a Buharist since prior to 2015. And what made me look at his direction politically was actually the poor performance of the then President Goodluck Jonathan. I actually supported President Jonathan then, his first tenure especially, when he took over from the late Yaradua. I looked forward to him performing. I look forward to seeing a lot. In fact, I had a high expectation of him. And you can imagine, I'm sure that was my first practical, direct experience with politics. And maybe my hopes were too high, but nonetheless, he disappointed me.
Okay.
Not just me, I'm sure many other persons were not too glad with his style of governance, the fact that it seemed he didn't really have the firmness needed to make executive decisions. Jonathan seemed too gentlemanly. I don't know if that is the right word. In fact, some analysts, most of the times back then, described him as a weak, president. And the reasons were not far-fetched. There were a lot of reasons. There were a lot of things that abounded then that you could see this guy does not have the political will to hit the nail on the head. And then I think also he kowtowed a lot to the demands of some sections of the country. I watched him every day. Back then I worked in an office. I had access to a lot of data confidential information. So both the news you're reading on paper and the data you have access to just made me, shake my head over him. And I expect not, it wasn't too much. I just expected a president that would make me proud, exercise your presidential powers, use your executive powers, exercise your will, and just give us basic good governance. That didn't really happen, it seems it was mostly floating all through, right, his administrations. And so as at 2011, my colleague back then in the office, 2011 particularly, told me he would prefer a Buhari, right? But me, I went all out for Jonathan. I supported him. But then the 4 years down the line, I wasn't happy. And I think I saw reasons why my colleague back then had preferred a Buhari. And that's why in 2015, in fact, I couldn't wait for Jonathan to to leave office. And then, much to my chagrin, the fact that he wanted to run again for the. I'm like, come on, we've given you 6 years, 6 good years. Yeah. What have you done with it that you think you deserve our support again? And I couldn't wait, so I went totally all out for a Buhari. And you can imagine, I'm sure that's when people started looking at me, especially from this part of the world where the regional sentiment was really high. People didn't understand why a young lady like me would be supporting a northerner. You add his religion, but I didn't give a care. As far as I was concerned, it's about country here. And I need someone. You don't have to be perfect. Just exercise your political will. Make the tough decisions where there is a need to make tough decisions. So that was why I supported PMB. And then coming to his performance, Buhari himself has not, I won't say he completely satisfied my yearnings when it has to do with governance. And as a matter of fact, even towards the end of his administration, I think I would say I was disappointed because in his first term, he exercised a bit of that political will, but a bit towards the end of his first term and entering his second term, you could see that it seemed relatives around him seemed to have hijacked power. You could see even towards the end of his second term, there were decisions that were made, and you could easily tell that this is not a Buhari decision. And from back end news or information, you could hear things like, when once you present a matter to him that looked like it is going to fight corruption, that Buhari will always put his signature without necessarily knowing the motives of those who are presenting these things to him. Take, for example, the cashless policy that they executed towards around the elections period. That really, really placed a lot of hardship of Nigerians. But we all knew politically it was just targeted at one or two persons, right? So, but why do you have to make but in any case, just because you can present a matter to a Buhari and tell him this is going to fight corruption, it was enough for him to sign on. But you're placing a direct hardship on the people. And that wasn't the only policy. Even the fuel subsidy removal. It was at the end of his administration that it was removed. If you wanted to remove a fuel subsidy, why didn't you plan for it? Plan for it, pre, during, and post of that policy. And so that we know you're acting out in good faith. Not that you're about to hand over power and you deliberately removed it, ensured that in that year of elections, that in the first 6 months of the year, subsidy was paid for, but in the last 6 months of the year, when you would have left, it was practically not included in the budget. That was wickedness. It was the height of it. But I also know, even though the buck stops at his table, but we some of us who can read beyond, handwriting, we can see it is people. It's those who probably did not want a particular candidate to take over power from them. They were instrumental to these things. But definitely, I have to place the blame on PMB because that was the administration that took that decision. And so it's I believe that decision, especially the fuel subsidy removal, is also it's the major reason why Nigerians are having it extremely tough today. I know that the present president had taken responsibility for that decision, but nonetheless, it wasn't him who made the decision. The decision was made quietly way before he came on board. All he did was just to affirm, now that subsidy is gone. And truly, subsidy was gone. Because as he was taking over power, subsidy was not in the budget. Fuel subsidy, it wasn't in the budget. And maybe if he knew the real practical outcome, he may have found a way to say, this administration had removed, but somehow I think it's of recent that he had to mention that actually when he came on board, but maybe he just wanted to take a bit of glory in that, but it came with a lot of consequences because the criticism about the subsidy is not necessarily that the subsidy removal is bad on its own, because as far as we're concerned, all the major presidential candidates from the PDP, APC, and Labour Party, they all had agreed that subsidy has to go. But we all know a responsible government has to plan for such major national policy. Unfortunately, the president who took over, an administration where that decision was already made. So I think that's where the hiccups really came from, and then we are still paying the price of that today. Do we have to go back to an era of where fuel subsidy was in place? We can't, because even if the president would have loved to take away a bit of the suffering for us to get back to that era, the country can't even afford. We can't afford. We've borrowed. We can't afford it. We are broke. We are too broke to pay for such.
Country.
And yes, and then Buhari. In fact, the major thing I expected from Buhari's administration was a political will to tackle corruption heads on. I wasn't expecting too much. We needed a leader. We knew that the Hydra head of Nigeria has been corruption. The fact that, especially the major ones, because if you talk about corruption generally, there are minor corruptions, but there are major ones that affect all lives. For example, if you budget a 2 billion naira project for education, and then contractors and some stakeholders, political stakeholders involved, get home with a 1.5 billion naira and then manage to, deploy 500 million into that project. We all know the outcome, how it turned out. So if you replicate that sort of behavioral pattern across board, that's why we are where we are as a country. And so I felt someone who has the right political will to at least close the loopholes, a bit of it. You cannot, it can't be perfect, but at least close the major loopholes. Then we can have even a president who will come build on it, because when you close the loopholes, you would have been able to save some funds that you can use now to develop the country. But in my general assessment of a PMB, I think that he didn't have a collective intelligence or an intelligence needed to oversee a system as large as a nation like Nigeria. Because you can be personally upright. You do not appreciate corruption. You cannot be bribed nor give a bribe, because actually we don't shy away from the fact that why we became Buharis was he represented, he was a citizen who represented the ideals of the kind of leaders we want in our country. We have to give that to him, because not many, in fact, very few Nigerians are like that. So, but coming to overseeing a system in terms of leadership now, how translating that into overseeing the efficiency of the country is where he actually lacked. I mean, how do you translating his personal ideals to governance, to the collective governing of the people? It's where he missed it. So that's why I believe a lot of the times when eventually people had interface to him and asked him about, or brought some things to his notice, and he said he was shocked. He didn't know, he was not aware.
He said that a number of times.
A number of times. So
said, I'm not aware.
He was shocked too many times. So you see, there were things Nigerians were doing, relatives of his, people in his government were doing that he was not even aware of. And so he lacked the oversight to, supervise the system. And so too many things happened under him. And so talking about political will, I'm sure he had, because there were decisions we saw him making, but most of those decisions, I think he was manipulated, presents a thing to him knowing that he's going to buy this, but you have a different motive for it, right? So, meaning that if he could be taking those decisions, he had the political will, which was quite one of the major reasons I voted for him in any case. But that intelligence supervised the running of the country entirely, and setting the right persons, because you can't actually see everything going on. But if you have the right eyes placed strategically in different positions, I think that helps. But I also saw a weakness in him. Buhari believed, maybe he thought everybody was like him, that if you're not corrupt, and the people you've known for some years, over 20, 30 years of your life, you grew up with, that were like you, they're likely the same way you are over the years. Maybe he didn't know people change. So I feel he trusted people he grew up with, and expected they're like him. They've not changed, but that was very far-fetched from the situation. And we saw these people who diverted a lot of public funds, did a lot of terrible things right under his nose, and I'm sure most of the time he was not aware. Unfortunately, even though Jonathan handed over an administration that wasn't too good. I mean, the likes of Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala could say things like, hey, she's been warning, let the government save, but they refused. The likes of Sanusi Lamido, they were, and even Goodluck himself, as he was leaving power, he told civil servants, buckle up for hard times ahead. Our crude oil, it was dwindling. The revenue was dwindling. So they saw we were heading for an economic crisis. So somehow Buhari just came to take over that sort of situation, and then just meandered around for 8 years, that snowballed into this present time. So we had, I think we've been blessed as a country. We've had all of the good times to have done the needful to save, build structures, build infrastructures, and getting to a point such as this where crude oil, the value of our crude oil has dwindled. It wouldn't have been much hit. And even with the fuel subsidy removal today, we would have had we had enough of substances, to use in preparing for this time. So, but because we didn't do our homework, we had not prepared, and so all of us are suffering the effect of it today. That is if it's all of us, because as far as we're concerned, those we are taking care of with our public funds are still having a good time.
They're not feeling what
they're still having the best of times.
Well, that's interesting about your assessment of the Buhari administration. I still remember 8 years of Buhari's administration. I have my own assessment about the administration, but today is for you.